Okay, we'll get started. Okay, so this is a webinar. We're going on Introduction to Revit 2023. It's going to be pretty PowerPoint heavy. I do hope to, there's a lot to show. So I think it's one of the most exciting like new releases for Revit that I've seen in the last, at least the last 5 years. I think it's a very a good step. It's probably not really got anything huge in itself, but just due to the multitude of changes, just things work a lot cleaner. Things that we've been expecting for years, and that just seems to work a little bit better. Definitely a release we should be getting into and downloading and using, at least for every project from now on. Like I said, going to be pretty PowerPoint heavy. I am hoping to actually open it up and show some things in the live demo. I am going to limit myself to an hour. And like I said, there's a lot to show. Hopefully I do get a good 5 minutes or so to actually show you the changes in person as well. So VinZero, Think Future. So we're now part of the VinZero group of companies. We foster innovation through delivering software and hardware solutions. We do consulting, training, development, and managed services. We are a trusted technology advisor to our customers through the breadth and depth of our service, offering technical expertise, commercial flexibility, and high levels of customer service, and really understanding your needs and how we can get you to deliver stuff more efficiently and better. A little bit about us. So we've got a bunch of brand partners under VinZero, and that makes us one of the largest platinum partners for Autodesk globally. We have over 500 employees across 32 offices globally, covering 25 languages. I'm only doing one language. We do provide data management and integrated solutions, BIM implementation, consulting services, CAD management services, on-site and online training. The online training has been quite successful, and also customized content creation. So a lot of content and Revit families. About myself, I'm the structural technical lead at A2K. I'm really looking at a lot of those business workflow transformations and software implementation. I have over 25 years of experience in the structural and consulting engineering industry, doing everything. Basically, I like to pride myself that there probably isn't much I haven't drawn. So industrial, commercial, infrastructure, bridges, high density residential, in both design and construction documentation. I've been using Revit for over 10 years. I do have the Structural Engineering Associate Diploma. I'm a certified design professional from Autodesk, certified Autodesk instructor, and a certified Bluebeam consultant. I do a lot of talks in the industry and webinars, and big advocate for animation and trying to get those efficiencies in your deliverables. If you do have any questions, do feel free to use the chat. Just throw any questions in there. I will try and review that at the end. I probably won't pay much attention as we go, and I'll address your questions. Key themes for 2023. So design productivity, simulation and analysis. There's been a big step change in that, the way they do the analysis. It just works a lot smoother. I really think it's going to engage a lot more of the engineering side of you guys. So more your structural engineers, it's going to make it a lot easier. And also to get that interoperability going between Robot, Autodesk Robot, which is the structural analysis software, and Revit itself. Cloud, everything's pushing more towards the cloud. So a lot of changes there as well, and its integration with the construction, Autodesk Construction Cloud. Design optimization, so that's really improved a lot, but it is really going through that generative design as well, which has been a great feature. And documentation efficiency. So like I say, I reckon this is one of the biggest gains, and it's sort of almost, it's because of sort of 1,000 or a multitude of changes that's really going to be a big gain, but nothing really major, but it's just because of the amount of minor changes. So we're going to go through, I'm not going to read all these out. We will go through these in order sort of thing, but you can see we can pick work planes, enable cutting in views. There are American shape tables that have updated and British, probably not too much for us Aussies. Elevation-based options, there's better performance as well. I will go through this stuff rather than just reading them all out. Yep. Documentation efficiency, we've got our floor folding lines and split lines. So you can actually do that over a whole floor rather than having to do it sort of part floors. Filter by sheet and schedules. So that's quite a good one as well. A lot of rebar. So you can now propagate the rebar into similar walls and it will cut them around the new openings. So if you do have like trimmers, etc., you can basically propagate that reinforcement sort of style, for want of a better description, into the adjacent wall. And even if it has different openings, it will sort of amend that to suit and still keep like the general sheet and your trimmers, etc. Swapping views on sheets, view filter enhancements, etc. So I'm going to start by going through some of the design productivity changes. Now the measure tool, we can quickly check distances in Revit. So we're quite familiar with that Revit tool in like the measure tool. In previous releases, the measure between two references was only in really 2D views. In 2023, we can do that in orthographic and perspective 3D views. So you can now snap to any position in 3D without those work plane restrictions. Using the hotkey control, so just by simply holding control down, you can lock the measurement so it'll remain perpendicular. Might be useful, for instance, if you're measuring between two walls. You can see there on the little diagram, you can easily sort of get these heights and these widths in quite easily with the measure command now without having to change your work plane. You can measure the shortest distance to a target plane by enabling that perpendicular snap through the menu or that keyboard shortcut in 3D views. You could use that when measuring the vertical height between these 2 points that are not directly above each other. Yeah, it'll greatly improve by enabling those fast measurements in any 2D or 3D view. So I'm sure a lot of us use those dimensions and measurements quite a lot in your day-to-day. So you're going to find that a very good change. Picking a work plane. This is one I particularly like and one it should have had for years, I think. You can simply use PK now. So PK is the new hotkey and you can hit PK and just pick your plane. You can see now under the set, instead of where it just had set a work plane and then would take you through to this dialog to then pick a plane, you can now directly pick it under there, or you can simply type in that hotkey PK and just pick a plane. The amount of days I go through and you might change your work plane 100 times, you know, it's going to save you an hour a day. You can now remember, it now remembers the last plane you used in the project. So that means when you're loading and placing like work plane based families, you can activate the last used work plane as your default option. Will be retained until you set it. So especially that's going to really help you load and place work plane based components faster. When duplicating a material, you can choose to duplicate the assets or use those shared assets. There are now 2 new options available in that menu. You can duplicate materials and assets from the source material, or you can duplicate using those shared assets. This will allow you to better manage your materials when making the duplicates. So it will really grab all those shared assets or the material assets. Now this is for like decals and textures and that's probably a bit more architectural. Like you may not use this a lot, but it will allow you to share them across your teams using your Autodesk docs or your external servers. In previous versions, when you were rendering in BIM Collaborate Pro, you'd encounter that missing render appearance warnings a lot. because like workstations that weren't on the network can't read those local custom files. So you can map those textures into a Autodesk Docs folder path, which will allow you to render on every workstation. So if you do a lot of rendering, you're going to find this a big improvement. If you don't, you won't. It'll allow you to collaborate more efficiently and create those visualizations and renders across teams, remote, etc., using Autodesk Docs. When selecting a view reference, you can search the list for a specific view. So you can now actually search for that view. So when you use the drop down, you can start to type in the name of the view. So rather than, especially on a major project, you know, if you've got 700 drawings, etc., like that would really, you know, speed it up. So you can see that you can start to type the name in and you'll really filter and search through those views. So it allows you to really put them on quickly. When creating those section views in Revit, objects are generally cut automatically when it passes through the solid geometry. A few Revit categories have not been cuttable in previous releases. Again, if you're cutting those sections, if you're using a lot of furniture or furniture systems casework, like your joinery work, even your specialty equipment and plumbing, you'll notice that they sort of just didn't cut properly, where now that cutting has been enabled for those categories. So you can simply select the object belonging to that category, click the edit family, and you need to ensure that you have enabled cutting in views. So there's that new option there, and that will then allow it to be cut. So when you're moving that section line, you'll see that the family's cut automatically. I'll give you a lot better control over the display of those families in your views. Aligning couplers. Again, this is probably only going to be useful for people who are using couplers, so pre-tensioned or post-tension slabs. You can rotate those couplers now with respect to the bar end. So you can see how you can actually, from before where it was quite straight, where now you can actually align it. So you get that more true representation. Yeah, probably not much more to be said about that, but it'll rotate it to align to the view to make sure it's going to place it correctly. You can change the structural usage value in non-load bearing walls to create those structural walls that define the spaces and support, but they don't support that vertical load except their own weight. So you can now export those structural walls to IFC for better representation and reinforcement, etc. So it allows you to really put that reinforcement in those non-load bearing partition walls. We've got, like I was just saying, this is one of the great features. This is one of those like sort of big step changes if you're doing a lot of reinforcement work. So we have that adaptive propagation features now. It will really help you when you're reinforcing. As I said before, you can sort of see how the reinforcement here for the columns and even the sort of header above the doorway there. Now that's simply been propagated into the next wall, and you can see how that reinforcement has adjusted for the wider wall and the different size header. So you can work on a design that's got those similar concrete elements. You can quickly propagate that, and they don't need to be identical. So that's the power of that adaptive propagation rather than just propagation. If you're used to the propagating connections and that, they sort of really need to be pretty much exactly the same. But this is a very much adaptive propagation for the rebars. Simply select the concrete element that hosts that rebar, select your propagate rebar command, and then you can choose that alignment method by the host or by the face, and they're then aligned based on the original faces. You can copy individual bars as well. So simply by selecting one or more of those rebars in that host and propagate them aligned to a face in the same host or in a similar concrete element. When modeling complex structures, such as like your civil infrastructure, like your hogged girders or curved buildings, you can use those free-form rebars, and they can again be placed in any concrete host. And that will work for those bars as well. So they can be propagated in a similar fashion for those like shape-driven rebars. So you might have, you know, the cog might suddenly jump up or something like that. Well, a hog won't suddenly jump up. But yeah, you might have a step in that girder and it will reflect the new one. These features will really enable you to model rebar faster and easier and be a big productivity change. If you do a lot of rebar, you'll be pretty excited about this one. We also have those library-based steel connections now, so you can model your design intent faster and enable that structural engineering and fabrication rules. So it does have sample rules that are provided for placing those connections, and they're found in the automation player. You can then simply search for them by ranges. So you can look at the ranges and see what sort of members. So you can remember, or an important thing to remember is all those structural members can leverage that information stored inside those elements. Your model can use the structural analysis results imported into Revit from Robot as well, structural analysis professional or even third-party ones. And you can set up these rules based on profile sizes, steel grades, or even the internal forces. It does include a lot of sample connection libraries for certain regions, Australia being one of them. They're customizable. So that's probably the best thing about it. You can customize, and that enables you to adjust them and extend them to meet the local requirements. We are going through our library now, and we're really, A2K, we're really working on doing a lot of the common industry standard ones that are used commonly in Australia. Please reach out to us if you do a lot of steel detailing. We're working up a library. So this is for the cloud viewer, so you can easily publish and then open rebar views using your Autodesk Docs or your Australian Autodesk Construction Cloud Viewer to inspect and share those 3D rebar details, which greatly improves your productivity when you're using those cloud hosted projects. So this is what we have now, an elevation parameter. So these are really for like MEP tags and things like that. And like we can use it in structures, like you can do the upper and lower elevations and actually put these and sort of schedule that stuff as well. And you've got all that in there. So they really, it's really an MEP one, but I thought I'd point it out in the structural one here. But it really enables you to sort of like tag all those slopes, etc. Yep. So these are the elevation tags. Yep. So we've got our temporary. So you in these ones, these are active. You can activate the dimensions from the option bar. So you can see here you can, and these are the temporary dimensions that are automatically shown for the nested families. So you can see here, we've got the setting there. It's a nested family. It contains all those where you can now get those temporary dimensions through. The room performance, again, this is something like that you probably wouldn't use a lot, but you can get those area and volumes out a lot better. So you've got the regeners, particularly of linked models with a large number of rooms. Again, probably from a structural point of view, something you're not going to use a lot, more for sort of your MEP, where they are looking at HVAC volumes, etc., and things like that. So in Revit 2023, we've really got that improved performance. So this is for your like large selections. So particularly when you're selecting like obviously items that are maybe your mechanical stuff or your electrical stuff, it does really now enable you to really grab those items out quicker, and you can activate those tools. It really just it's a display performance. So it's one of those things that's probably a bit hard to explain. You will notice if you are dealing with large models, it'll just work a lot quicker. A lot of additional view performance, etc. So the user interface have been optimized to really reduce that unnecessary background graphics regens for like, say, like the steering wheel rewind. So that was generating screenshots at all times, not just while it was in use. So they've cleaned that up. You know, they've got a figure here. So it's an average improvement of like 35% in navigation performance. So again, you will notice it, particularly on large projects, that it really is performing a lot better. Those families containing those complex imports. So again, really in your 3D view, that's been improved a lot. So Revit 2023 provides 3 times more responsive view navigation with unpinned elements. Raster images as well. So they, you know, used to perform a bit inaccurately, especially if you were rotating or doing some transparencies, where now that's a 3 times performance in view performance, display, and stability as well. View filters. So people reported that the performance really suffered when dragging those annotations or editing the parameters in the properties palette when it's a large number of view filters. We're talking like large projects, so sort of 300 plus sort of view filters. So now they've sort of fixed a lot of that background, and it enables the filter dialog to work 11 times faster than previous releases. So for a model with 350 plus view filters, you know, you've sort of got a 30 to even 400 times improvement over the previous releases. So dragging your text notes, dragging dimensions, tags, changing dimensions, changing text notes, etc. So a lot of little improvements that really do make a big difference in that performance. Less of that blue spinning wheel that we all know and love. We also have a lot of performance when better performance when you're linking those DWG files, sometimes up to around even 700 times faster. So, you know, there was one test done where we tested it. It was a link time. It took 2 hours to bring in a massive project where that's gone to 10 seconds. So it's really improved a lot. When loading option items in that type selector, so there's, you know, so sometimes it took like sort of 6 seconds, but it's now almost immediate. We did previously took like 48 seconds to change a generic model assembly item. And then we've got that down to immediate. So all these additional user requested performance improvements will significantly boost your productivity across your Revit projects. Simulation analysis. So I'll sort of touch on this. Like I said, it's got a lot of improvements here that'll be great for the structural engineers amongst you. A lot of improvements in the way it works. So it's now completely autonomous. So it's not directly tied, like it is tied to the physical model itself, but you can sort of unlink or join things up. It really works a lot cleaner. So you can almost focus when you're starting the project entirely on the analytical model, just like you would in your typical analysis software. And they're fully parametric and can be associated with your grids and levels, allowing you to position those exactly. And it's really sort of like bridges that gap between like your robot. You can almost you know, use robot just for your analysis, but you can get your model using almost the same workflows directly into Revit. So that's the process. We all know that, like we build up the analytical model and then use the structural, and then produce our model from that. So this now gives you a lot more flexibility. So you can really, you can see here, like depending on your IP points for these columns, you can literally drag them around. So it might be sort of going from, so you can sort of move them to to sort of give you that speed and accuracy. And it protects it from those unexpected changes where you may move the sort of how these columns intersect at the bottom, but the actual analytical model will stay where it is. So you can sort of see there, it's probably a little bit harder to see on the screen, but your typical analytical model in old school Revit, or I'm saying old school, it's sort of current Revit, I suppose, 2022, etc. You would have that analytical in the center of that beam or slanted column. You can see now how we can actually move that IP and put it to where we actually want it to go. So you can have that independent of the physical item. It will keep those, like it will sort of keep track of that relationship between that physical and the analytical model elements, and it's easy to associate them with each other. It's a very big change. So you've got that analytical model automation as well now. So we can generate a connected and consistent analytical model automatically from that physical geometry. We can designate first, second, and third priorities. So if you need to prioritize column locations over beam selections, etc. So you can set up those first priority elements like your column locations, and they're the master elements, meaning that like your secondary and third priority elements will snap to them, like your beams, etc. You can specify that tolerance, and you can specify whether analytical openings should be created for selected floors and walls, etc. It's a lot easier to update. Interoperability. So we've got a few improvements. Format Pro to linked CAD formats. So you can now link those format files directly in Revit, and changes to the format file will be reflected in Revit when you reload or bring in the project. You can now actually link that linked format file in just 2 clicks, where before it sort of took a bit longer, and it's just improved. So if you really, between Revit 2023 and Format Pro 2023, do make sure you match up your versions, always try and do that. You'll just find it's a lot more efficient. The 3D sketch feature, which was in Revit 2022, enables you to launch that format session from Revit, and you can translate those Revit elements as conceptual geometry. You can enable the preview mode and select those layers that you're going to transfer to Revit, and bring that across. So you can really highlight those and bring just those walls across, etc. So there's improvements with the CAD files as well. So you can now link in additional CAD file types. So AXM, OBJ, and your STL files directly into your Revit project. They can be placed on levels or named on named horizontal reference planes as they're imported. So you've got a place at option here. So you will have that place at, and like your options will be there. You'll just have a bit better control over the placement and appearance of CAD format or CAD content in Revit. Remember as well, make sure you enable that cutting in views. There was some instances before, especially with dealing like with some Plant 3D stuff, if you brought in like the 3D CAD elements from Plant 3D, etc. It wouldn't cut it greatly, where now it will enable you to do that cutting in the view of the 3D CAD. So that we're using a lot more, it's really improved the way it works with that Building Smart IFC data. So those IFC attributes have been added as instance and type parameters now, and they will export. So when you export to IFC, so you'll get all that coming out, and it will really improve and find that, and it'll improve the integrity of your IFC data exchanges. So if you do a lot of IFC work or need to export as IFC, which happens on a lot of projects, it is going to drag that information across. Direct shape. So this is stuff like from like your Rhino 3DM and STL files. So you can really, it's made it easier to define that placement of those imported shapes. So you've got your origin or auto origin to origin, manual origin and manual center. You can select that and place it in. So you do have a lot more better control of how we used to place in those 3D elements. Cloud and data. So the ability to share relevant data is important, as we know. So we've now got those data exchanges. Revit 2023 enables those data exchanges. You can publish the Revit file along with your set of 3D views to Autodesk Docs. So it can go straight to Autodesk Docs. And the data contained within each of those views can be tailored for whatever they need. So yeah, or whatever trade needs that information. You can then get that published view out and use that to get out the information you want, basically, directly to Excel, etc. So you're really able to really share that, the specific data you want to. It's great for, you know, automating your information sharing and things like that. So really for that quantity takeoffs, cost estimation, etc. It's really improved in that bit. You can really sort of get those subsets of that information across and make it a lot more shareable. Parameters service. So this will allow you to create a library of parameters on the construction cloud. So instead of having those parameters, those shared parameters based on like a network location or etc., that can now be created on the Autodesk Construction Cloud. You can pull them into all the models. So it greatly helps like with your existing shared parameter files and things like that. So you can share them easily on the cloud, which will enable obviously everyone to get those same shared parameters rather than just having a sea of different shared parameters that everyone has, and you can manage them in the same way. So you can all go to that one on the cloud and share those parameters on the cloud, and then it's constantly being updated. If you are doing a lot of work with shared parameters, you'll find that was always a bit of a bugbear. You'd have to share around the text file, etc., or have it on a network, and then, you know, sort of make sure you had it where now it's just on the cloud. Makes it a lot easier. So you can now force your work set relinquishing on cloud models from the Revit home screen. So on your home screen, you can force relinquish. It will remember the last account as well. So you can decide when you decide to save your project to the cloud, the last account is remembered and displayed in the Save As Cloud model. It'll improve your productivity by really helping you to quickly find those recently accessed accounts when you're saving those cloud models. In previous releases of Revit as well, if you did roll back a cloud model, I know that everyone's done that one time. If you do a lot of work with cloud models, you probably have done that at some stage. It was a bit of an irreversible process. So all your backup versions newer than the version selected would be discarded. So it was a bit destructive, where now it's got that non-destructive rollback process. So all the backup versions are preserved in the history, and you can roll backwards or even forwards to that existing backup. So yeah, I don't know what needs to, it's just great that if you roll it back, you're not going to actually go like, oh God, oh, not that you'd say that, but yeah, you wouldn't panic that you've undone something. You can always roll forward as well. Design optimization. So really looking at that generative design and those Dynamo player updates, there's been a big change in Dynamo with this new release. I will show it, hopefully, if I've got time. I should have time to show a quick bit of live demo on how Dynamo works. You can now enter those number inputs through the study. You can use sliders, etc. So it just works all a little bit smoother. the Dynamo player user interface has been made consistent with that generative design. You can see how it really looks a lot more like the generative design in the Revit user interface. Just making it a bit more intuitive. You know, if you do a lot of that generative design and now you're looking at, you'll go, oh, why is this so different? So we've really got it sort of looking the same. Your generative design studies, etc., and your Dynamo player. This will allow you to achieve better design outcomes with an enhanced user experience. So yeah, it's just a lot more approachable. Documentation efficiency. So these are where there's a good sort of 15 things here, which again, will really add up to great efficiencies. We've got this is one I particularly like. So you can put in floor folding lines and split lines. So we've got those new subcategories in there. So when you're modifying a flat floor with your shape editing tools, especially if you're doing a lot of exposed slabs where you need to do this, you can add them to divide them into those subregions independently. So it will enable you to control the visibility of those sloping boundaries as well. And those interior edges. These new categories are really, instead of just the interior edges, you've now got your fold lines and your split lines as separate. Conditional formatting. So this is where we can visually identify parameters in schedules that either, you know, we sort of want to pick out, so you can really, you know, you can easily select between the fields you want to format. So they'll be configured independently to really help you see the difference between them and really enable you to like visually understand your project data a bit better. You can see, like, it's probably hard to explain, but yes, you can obviously put in the colors, like, and it just, you can imagine how that makes it a lot easier than actually trying to read them. So yeah, you can make it a lot easier. Filter by sheet in schedules. So this is a big one now, that we can actually filter by the sheet. So if you did have like a large shopping center or something and you did want only the schedule to reflect the stuff that is on that sheet, you can now filter by sheet. So yeah, they can be dragged and dropped onto sheets, much like you would with any other view. So there's a new capability for those that enable them to detect and display only the elements relevant to that schedule on that sheet. Again, pretty much speaks for itself, that one. The rebar cover in schedules and tags. So there's 4 new files available in the schedules and 4 new parameters in those tags. You've got the rebar cover, your rebar top face, bottom face, and other face. So they are now schedulable, which will enable you to put those covers in schedules. Again, sort of goes without, it's pretty self-explanatory. Displace items in 2D views. Now, for those that sort of did this in 3D a lot, you'd sort of have that and you'd sort of see where you could stretch the items out. You can now do this in 2D. So it's great if you're doing a bit of a construction sequencing or sort of really pointing out the different areas. So you can displace those. You can adjust the position of an element, any element in a 2D view, to just help the people in the project, like project participants, to view it more clearly and better understand that design intent. And yes, you can tag them as usual. So it'll really improve the, like, I know that probably it's not like Australian standard, I suppose, to do a displaced 2D view. But if you, yeah, I can think of a multitude of times where I wanted to show them that, yeah, this beam is out here, like, and show them the full size, etc., and how it's, and what is actually the corbel. So displacing those elements in 2D views. You can tag all displaced elements in 3D views. So as I said, we were always able to displace in the 3D, but that tag feature was always a bit difficult. So now you can tag the element before or after that displacement, and the tag will move with the element. So before, you'd have to tag it sort of before or after, and then you'd have to move it separately. And if you do a lot of this stuff, it just, yeah, it just works a lot better. and the tag will move with the element. So in 2022, we got the ability to associate a tag with more than one object and create multiple leaders from that single tag. Where in 2023, you can now select multiple elements and generate that single tag for all of them. So you can control that visibility of the tag leaders by hiding one or several, etc. Where now, yeah, you can merge and add or remove hosts, and really allows you to snap and adjust those tag leaders individually. And yeah, if you're using multi-leader tags, you'll just find it a big improvement. I can't say I really love that picture there. It's probably, yeah, I probably wouldn't do it like that, but yes, you can if you wish to. That's probably a bad example. I'd probably use it for more, yeah, like items, not really so much for Rio. Additional taggable categories. So the tag feature's been now extended to support more categories. So you can tag architectural columns, entourage, fascias, gutters, soffits, handrails, top rails, pads, ramps, and sweeps as well, wall sweeps. And it includes in those model groups as well. Displaced rebar representation. Now, this is a big one for everyone who always used to do the 3D reinforcement, and then you'd have to sort of overdraw that again. So if you're like a traditional structural documentator or structural drafty like I am, you'd always go, yeah, I can model it like that, but it doesn't show the laps properly because all the bars are in the same line and you can't really see it. So now you can displace those rebar elements. A great improvement if you sort of love your Rio like I do. You can offset those bars slightly in those concrete shop drawings to really help people see more clearly and understand your design intent better. So when they're displaced in a view, their positions are changed in the view only. So the displaced bars they can still be tagged as usual. So like something like this, for instance, you'd know that all those bars would just sit on top of each other if modeled properly, but now you can actually displace them and really show how those bars are working. Great improvement. Yeah, so the solid bar representation now. So that's 3D view where you used to have to turn it to, so now if you turn it to fine, those rebars will be displayed as solid. So the view as solid property in those view visibility states, that's been removed. So in this dialog, you can now toggle between the different, and it's available for all those Revit elements, area, rebar, sheet, rebar couplers, etc. You can avoid those clashes because they're represented as solids in 3D views as those of the linked models as well. Just helps, it's something everyone's wanted for quite a while. Improved orientation for generic annotations. So any generic annotations you did on ceiling plans will now match their plan view orientation. So rotating your host element will not affect the generic annotations. Generic annotations will also now mirror with their host elements. So yeah, it's again, you'd probably have to see it for it to show, but yeah, it'll now sort of work a bit smarter. So you can see in the previous how if you did have tags and you mirrored it, you'd get sort of this sort of stuff here, which you don't really want. Where now, if you mirror it, it actually like keeps that orientation. If you do a lot of that, it makes it a lot easier. Page order in PDF, something that you know, everyone's sort of been wanting for a while, you know what I mean? Like to change that, you'd have to change it after or whatever, where now you've actually got that ability to change the order and how you want them to be printed. So you can customize them by your browser organization or your sending sheet numbers, or even do your own manual order by dragging and dropping the sheets into whatever order you choose. Again, if you always set your sheets out properly, you don't have that issue, but sometimes there is a need for you to drag the sheets around, which you can now do. So the field region tool allows you to define those areas in annotation families. So in previous releases, they were driven by the family type, and this required you to have a separate family type for each fill pattern, where now it's an instance parameter for those fill patterns. So you can individually control the fill pattern for each instance rather than doing it as a type. So it's just a added capability, which gives you a lot more flexibility in controlling the display of field regions. So yeah, now that it's an instance, it just makes it a lot easier. Swapping views on a sheet. This is another good one, I think. So you can simply swap the sheets. So to swap a view that's currently placed on a sheet with a compatible view, obviously, if it's not a compatible view, it doesn't really work too well. Like if you're, changing an elevation to a plan or something, not something you'd really do. But if you are grabbing those existing views, you can change them quite easily. As we said before, the view list now is searchable and it filters the compatible views. So if you just typed in elevation, for instance, you'd get just your elevations. And it makes it a lot easier. If you attempt to replace a view with a view that's already placed on the same sheet, it'll alert you saying, the view's current detail and sheet number. Really helps you to quickly reorganize your sheets by making that easy swap out of views, making your documentation even faster. Wall sweeps. So if you had like different decorative horizontal and vertical projections, such as your baseboards, cornices, etc. A new category now for wall sweeps has been added. So it's possible to control that visibility and that the graphical appearance of those wall sweeps. It's also got new filter rules. So for base constraint, a little bit hard to see here, but base constraint, base offset, and top constraint and top offset, which enables you to use your view visibility with those parameters. So you can visually identify walls at specific levels a lot easier. They'll give you better control over those visibilities. Coming a bit tight on time, I think I've got about 4 slides left, so we're nearly there, and I can actually get to show you some of this stuff in the real world and actually go through where to find the libraries and things like that. The project browser. So Revit 2023 introduces a new feature that makes it very easy to see those views that have been placed on sheets. This is one of the changes. I found when I first saw it, I thought, oh, what's going on here? But it's great, and it really gives you that quick. When you're on 2023 or not, you get this little, I don't know, pick box, I suppose, at the front, or icon for one of a more proper description. If it's solid filled, it indicates that that view is on a sheet. If it's empty, it means that it's not on a sheet. I know a lot of us, you might have your working drawings and then your presentation drawings, and you may already be using that filter in your project browser. But even if you're doing something like that, it will still show you what views are currently on a sheet and not. You should always set up your sheets pretty early on in a project, but sometimes you don't, and it just makes it a lot quicker in your documentation. You can go, oh, I haven't put that floor plan on a sheet yet or something. So it really just visually helps and makes life a lot quicker. Some of the additional documentation enhancements, so just touching on these briefly. Parameters are now filtered by an all category as well. So it really helps you to, like with those tag labels, etc. Improving the use, so you can find like the host count and things like that. Common property for model groups. So this is where you can actually have default parameters and have them available across both model groups and Revit links. So it just makes it a lot easier to tag and improve that efficiency in documentation. Performance, so this is again is probably the proof will be in the pudding type thing. You won't see it until you're actually using it, but there's a lot of that better hardware utilization. So now it's we're getting a bit technical here, but it's sort of, they employ parallelization, I can barely even say it. So it improves that processing where it's actually doing the processing in 2 areas at once. And it improves that processing by 20 to 60%, depending on that complexity. So your printing and exporting performance will be improved by up to 40%. The APIs as well. So the view and view sheet are now exposed for that, for the API. So if you do a lot of work with the API, you'll notice that there's a fair bit of improvements in there. That's about it technically. We will go into a bit of a live demo and I'll sort of show some of what it looks like. So allow me to open it up. You'll notice straight away it's got a nice flashy new icon. They've really changed the way it looks. Even the splash screen has improved substantially. I sort of like the new look. Some do, some don't. But yeah, I think it's a lot cleaner and a lot more modern than it used to be. Hopefully this won't take all day to boot up. That's a bad example if it does. Yeah, so you can't really see much difference at this stage. I'm just going to open up the sample project here. And straight away, we'll see that change in the project browser where I'm getting all the views here that are not placed on sheets. So the blank ones haven't been placed on a sheet yet, but the colored ones have. You can change that as well. You can choose to just not show that view placement, which obviously takes it off. I think it's a great feature though. So that view placement on sheet status is quite a good one through here. This conveniently does have an analytical model here. So I think this is probably the best way to show it a bit. You'll just notice it's a lot more usable. So if I sort of moved this column in this view, you'd see how, and I'll just move this column locally. That's probably going to destroy my model and everything's grouped. Let me just move it and it's pinned. Who would have pinned it? Probably me. Unpin. And if I select it again, you can tell this is a live demo. I haven't, so unpin, well now it's unpinned and I should be able to move it. Joys of a live demo, eh? Unpin it, now move it. You'll see how that all moved and you'll see actually how, well, okay, whatever. Yeah, but the analytical model here, that would have moved with it, where now I can actually make sure I'm placing it correctly. So I can have this independent of that physical model. So you can see there how I can select that analytical line of that column and I can choose which way I want to drag it. And it's quite easy for me just to drag it out to here. You'll see how it's snapping straight away. And you'll see how that hasn't affected the physical model. So the physical model, it is sort of separate to the physical model. So if you're doing a lot of just the analytical one on it, you can actually have this more accurate and more to what you want it to be. And obviously you can see how it snaps quite well. So you can really use that analytical model a lot better. Again, probably not the best example like doing this. Obviously it's all pretty straight and not something you'd sort of do a lot. But if you're probably a perfect example of this, if you're doing it a lot, is when you've got the columns that are skewed, slanted columns, and you want to actually have it IPing at a different point. You can see as well, if I do select part of that item, you'll see how I can add that association. So I can create that association between that and the physical item. Obviously, I've got the physical model turned off in this view. So yeah, I'd need to go to one where I've got them both turned on, etc. But that's that. Again, what else do we have? So again, I'll show the view placement. So if I do go to here and select it, you can see how we've got that positioning and view. And again, I can come in and I can search the view filter now. So I can actually type in 3D, and you'll see how that's allowing me to change that 3D view to whatever I wanted to change it to. And you are getting what sheet it's placed on as well, and you're able to filter those views. I could type in elevation as well, and it gets that. So this is a great little new feature, which I think is used a lot. Like you'll probably, I reckon elevations and sections is something where you'd use it a fair bit. So you can straight away change that from like the south elevation and very easily come in here, search that, go to elevation and just simply select north and it'll swap it out. So you can sort of see how that's, if you're doing a lot of that, it'll be a great feature. Just a couple of other things I wanted to point out. So the Dynamo has been a big change as well. Just aware that we probably I did only want to go for a maximum of an hour. And I think there's a couple of questions in there as well. So yeah, so I'll just quickly show Dynamo as well. I think I've got time to do that. So there's been a big change in Dynamo. It's now using the 2.1.3, I think, or 2.13 off the top of my head. So it's been a big change in Dynamo. If you use a lot of Dynamo, you probably know all this, but yeah, there's a bit, this does come in the latest release. If I just open up just one of my old scripts or something, you'll see that I don't think this is one I've fixed up. You'll see how this is the one thing, and it does sort of annoy you a bit, but it all stretches out. There is, like, you can select everything as well and right click. And if I go to align selection and distribute them, there is another quick way to do it. I've just not coming to me on my head. I think I can hold Alt Control L or Control A. I did do a, if you do have a look, Ben Burns, if you have a look at my LinkedIn, I did do a little thing on the Dynamo where I did show some of the things where you can easily respace this. It's yeah, there is a quick button which isn't coming to me. And the groups as well, you can sort of add things and take things away from groups a lot easier as well. I won't go into it too much here. I wasn't really intending on doing a big Dynamo presentation, but you can see it. It's a lot different if you're familiar with Dynamo. The way it works, it's sort of a lot cleaner. It's been one of the biggest step upgrades that I've seen in a while for Dynamo. Another thing, just a couple of things to point out. Just remember that it won't automatically load in the Australian library. I will put this link in the chat as well. If you do go through to your content. So I've just got a few websites here. This is where you can download your 2023 content. As far as I know, there have been some improvements, like I said, to the American library and the British library. I don't think there's been any large improvements, to be honest, to the Australian library. But this is where you can go. I will put it into the chat, that link where you can access the Australian library, which is under Australia. The joys of a live demo, whenever you have this stuff right in front of you and then you start looking at it and you can't find it. There'll be English content for Australia. Why am I not finding it? Usually we're right at the top, aren't we? Here we go. International English content for, that's us there. The International English Australia content for Revit 2023. Yes, as you know, as you're all aware, you can use the older families in Revit 2023, but just stops updating. You know what I mean? It'll make it a lot faster if you download the 2023 content, because then it doesn't have to upgrade the families each time you load it in. It will automatically be 2023 versions. There has been, and this is when I do recommend, so there has been the latest 2023.0.1 hotfix. Do make sure if you do install 2023 that you do install the hotfix. It did come out at the start of this month. There has been a lot of little bugs and that were happening that we heard, especially through support. This hotfix will resolve all them. Generally, I recommend to my clients that they always wait for the first hotfix, so to let everyone else find the bugs rather than you. That hotfix has come out. So do install 2023, go through your manage.autodesk.com and get your Revit 2023 hotfix, or of course, get it through your desktop app and get your latest update. So go under here. I've already got it in, obviously, so it's not there, but yeah, do make sure you install that update. Just as well, it did take a little, if a few of you are exporting your models and that and using that interoperability with advanced steel, which is very good. I know a few people were screaming about it. They have got that update now for the extension SMLX file changed to advanced steel. So that's now under your add-ins. And you should have that there. I don't think I've got that in as yet because it only did come out a couple of weeks ago. So if you are exporting your models to advanced steel for fabrication, do make sure you download that. It won't basically load in automatically. You do need to go through your desktop app or that to get that as well. Just going through some of the chat. So someone's asking, can this be set up to something like OneDrive? I think that come in about 10 minutes in. You're probably talking about the materials. Yes, you should be able to set up those materials, any shared location. But it's generally meant sort of to be on the cloud. Like if you're setting it up on like through Construction Cloud is probably the ultimate or the optimal way to do it, the best practice. Yes, you could path that to your OneDrive though. We'll be rerunning a similar session targeted for architects. I don't know. At this stage, I don't think so. I think I didn't take much out. So I don't know if there's a huge additional elements for architects that I did leave out. This is the only one I'm doing. Yep. What are Autodesk doing with mechanical for shop drawings in Revit? So it's more of an architectural structural software. Yeah. So yeah, you can do like it's a bit funny. Like I will just digress on this a little bit. You can, there is no drawing that you can't get out with Revit. You can cut down an item and display it at 1:1 or display it at 1:5 and show every single bolt hole and put the bolt holes in, etc. It's just a clumsy way to do it, and it's going to take a lot of time in that, where obviously if you export it out to advanced steel, you get those benefits of the automation. So for mechanical, like, yeah, I always recommend advanced steel. And I know mechanical is probably getting a little bit more, you know what I mean? Like this is where I think it's sort of, it doesn't fall over, but obviously using advanced steel for your structural steel work works pretty well. When you start getting into that real fine level of detail and in using Inventor a bit more, it does get a little bit clunkier. So yeah, anything that's sort of smaller than 100 mils and stuff like that, you're going to have issues with, but any sort of structural stuff, I'd be recommending advanced steel. You can create assemblies in this and get all your top views and that out, and then it's just a matter of displaying them, but it's going to take a fair bit of time and effort. I think that's all the Q&A in there. If anyone does have any HVAC, yeah, so mechanical services, HVAC, it's probably not my bag, to be honest. We do have a mechanical services consultant. He's not me. Maybe reach out there. Yep, so I'll just go through a couple more slides. Just we are going to finish up in a couple of minutes, or like 2 minutes or so, literally. So if you do have any further questions, now's your time to throw them in the chat. Just while I'm doing that, please visit our a2ktechnologies.com.au/events to view any upcoming webinars. We do have quite a few coming up. I don't know if there's one as well for like Inventor, what's new in 2023. I think we've got a couple of other ones coming up. We do have one that's our Construction Cloud BIM 360 focused as well, which I do recommend. Do have a look at our website for those upcoming webinars. And of course, I would like to thank you all for being here. Hopefully you've all got a lot out of it. Do feel free to reach out to your A2K representative. Feel free to contact us via email on that info@a2k, I'll try and say it right, info@a2ktechnologies.com.au, and do reach out. That's it. That's the end of it. Not much is coming in through the chat. Hopefully everyone had a bit of a good taste. I do believe a recording will be made available. So if you do want to catch up and go through any of those points, do feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or send me an email directly if you've got it, or go through there. And yeah, always interested to hear what you particularly loved about Revit 2023. Do get out there. I highly recommend it. It's quite stable now after that first update, and you'll find a lot of improvements in it, especially in those improvements and performance times. Thanks a lot for attending, and I'll catch up with you all soon. Thank you.